Hello everyone and welcome back to the 2021 Candidates Tournament. It's Fabiano Caruana versus Ding Liren. So Fabi is trying to get back at the Ding for defeating him in the first half of the tournament. This is the only victory that Ding achieved so far, which is pretty incredible. There were extremely high hopes for Ding as he was on his amazing 100 games unbeaten streak, 110 games I believe unbeaten streak. And after that, just qualifying for the candidates and everything, everyone thought that he would be maybe not winning the candidates, but that he will be pushing up until the very end. But it's not exactly what happened. But like I said, Fabiano is the only player he's defeated so far, and now Fabi has the white pieces, and he would very much like to retaliate and maybe catch up to Ne4 and the others. So let's see how this game went. It's quite a crazy one, but there were a lot of crazy games in this round. One game in particular that we are also going to cover, so don't worry. I know you guys are probably thinking, let's show that game, but we're going to show all the games, so no worries. But that being said, let's check out what happened here. Fabi with the white pieces opens with e4. We have e5 by Ding, knight to f3, knight to c6, and bishop to b5. So just a normal Ruy Lopez here. We have a6, Morphy's defense, and now bishop to a4. We have knight to f6, and we have castles now. So bishop to e7, rook to e1, and now b5, pushing back that bishop to b3, and here Ding just castles. And now, well, you could go for something like c3 and allow black to go maybe for a nice martial attack, and probably if Fabi plays c3, Ding definitely goes for the martial attack. There's no question about that, but Fabi goes for a4, which is something that's considered to be sort of the anti-martial approach to avoid such a dangerous line. So here a4, we have b4 by Ding, and now a5, grabbing more space on the queen side, and now d6. And here Fabi already had this position. He had it in Norway chess in 2020 against Arian Tari, and he continued with c3 in that game. But here he plays d3, and he still waits to throw in a few moves before he goes to c3 and maybe with the eventual d4. So here bishop to e6, attacking Fabi's bishop on b3, and Fabi just trades here. We have captures, and only now c3, preparing to strike in the center with the d4. Ding goes rook to b8. Now, even if he captures, then he's going to have a nice open or semi-open b file. And here, knight b to d2. Interestingly, the position has been reached in 2020 in the game between Ivan Šarić and Alexander Donchenko, that Šarić won very nicely. He struck in the center with the d4 right away. But here, Fabi still preparing it, knight b to d2, and now comes rook to b5, knight to d7, also a known move here. We have rook to b5 by Ding, and now finally d4, attacking in the center. Yes, your a5 pawn is under attack, but Fabi says we are not going to defend this pawn. So d4. We have b captures on c3, b captures, and now e captures on d4. We have c captures on d4. Fabi now has this very nice center here, and Ding already had this position. It's very interesting. He had it 3 times, and something most likely Fabi used in his preparation for this game. Ding had it against Grishuk, he had it against Basem Amin, and he had against Darius Švirc, and all of the 3 games were drawn. But in all of those 3 games, Ding played knight to b4. And here, Ding probably thought, okay, since I already had this position 3 times, I'm playing it against Caruana in the candidates. Obviously, Fabi prepared for knight to b4, so I'm going to play queen to c8, and queen to c8 is a new move here. So here, black announces that he is now ready to capture on a5, and that he wants to push this pawn to c5, create a passed c pawn, and then just start pushing. So it is now already, as of move 16, that we have a completely new game, and Fabi now needs to show us what he's prepared for this. So he goes bishop to a3 with well, just preparing e5 basically, and giving up the a5 pawn. So Ding grabs it with knight captures on a5, and now queen to c2. And now it's, okay, the c5 square is defended many times, but the ding still strikes in the center with c5. Doesn't matter, as it's also defended many times, so he would very much enjoy creating a passed pawn here, but this is what Fabi prepared. He goes e5 now, so the knight is under attack. You have to react to this. D captures on e5, and now D captures on c5. And now, after all is said and done, yes, black does have a passed a pawn, but white already has a passed c pawn that's on c5 currently, and if that pawn can start marching up the board, could be very good. And black is up a pawn, but it's a doubled e pawn, so there shouldn't be too much of a trouble, containing that. So here, knight back to c6, and now comes knight to e4. Fabi doesn't bother grabbing back the pawn here because it's not very well, promising. For example, after captures, and captures, you might see knight g4 attacking the rook and also the f2 pawn, and then something like rook to e2, bishop captures on c5. This is all pretty much forced. The bishop captures, queen captures, and now you get this position where there's a lot of pressure coming from black. It's not really white that's pushing for anything, and if this pawn starts marching down the board, you're gonna have a very hard time defending this. So instead of just grabbing back the pawn, Fabi goes knight to e4, and now ding captures. We have knight captures on e4, rook captures on e4, and now, while you could try and get a defender over to e5, I think Ding knew that Fabi was not really interested in winning back material, so he just goes rook to d8, getting the rook to the nice open d file, and now rook 8 to e1 by Fabi. And now, while there's nothing more pretty much to improve, he does defend it with bishop to f6. And now Fabi still needs to prove that this position was worth the pawn, and how is he intending to start pushing this blockaded pawn. So here we have h4 by Fabi, trying to most likely create some further weaknesses on the king side, and h6 by Ding. I know some of you are always joking I say Ding side, but I always say king side. And here rook 4 to e3, bringing back the rook, probably with the idea of maybe somehow shifting the knight over maybe to a better square, maybe to e4, and then maybe to d6 if at all possible. But we have rook to d5, and here Ding shows that he is now ready to go after the c5 pawn. The bishop is also coming to e7 to help out with the attack, and this pawn I think is now very, very certain that will not stay there for very long. So here Fabi needs to do something. He needs an active idea, and he starts with the g4. He wants to bust open the position with the g5. So first queen to e8 by Ding, and now comes king to g2, improving the safety of the king a little bit. Also, if needed, you can maybe shift the rook over to h1, but now h5. Now, if pawn captures, you're ready to recapture with the queen. So, of course, g5 by Fabi, and only now Ding brings the bishop back to e7. Ding wanted to bring the bishop back to e7, so g5 only helps him, really. And now this pawn will fall. There's not much Fabi can do about this, so now it's time to reclaim at least a little bit of material. Knight captures on e5. Bishop captures on c5, we have bishop captures on c5, and now rook b captures on c5, attacking the queen here. And here it's, again, a tough position for Fabi. His queen is under attack, and also there's now a triple attack on the knight here. So there aren't really all that many moves you can play here. Yes, the position looks promising for white, but if black doesn't give you a moment to recollect your forces, you're not really going to achieve all that much. So here queen to g6, the strongest move by far, if you don't want to lose any unnecessary material. Offers a queen trade. Now of course you cannot go any knight grabbing because the queen is undefended on e8. So here Ding trades with captures, and now comes e5, and now this pawn is defended, and also this is a passed pawn. So Ding now has two passed pawns, and Fabi still needs to show what he can do, but luckily he calculated everything precisely and pushes f4, and this is now a very nice pawn push. Point being that if the pawn is captured, you just easily win. For example, rook e8 check, and if king f7, knight h8 is checkmate. The pawn covers f6, and there's nowhere for the black king to go to. Knight covers g6. So only one of the ideas. So f4 cannot be captured, and even though Fabi's down a pawn, this f4 push does give him considerable counterplay. So here we have rook to d2 with check. And now, unfortunately for Fabi, you have to block this. You can't really move the king. For example, if something like king h3, then rook c2, and then you could run into a lot of trouble. Knight is coming to d4, and so on. So instead, after rook to d2 check, we have rook 3 blocking on e2, and now Ding just trades and alleviates some of the pressure along the e file. So rook captures on e2, rook captures, and now knight to d4. You could also capture on e4 here, but then maybe just knight captures on f4, and not much is happening here. So knight to d4, Ding still trying something, now attacks the rook, and we have rook to e4. So what do you play here? You could also consider something like rook captures on e5, but then we get rook captures, knight captures, and a5. You don't really want to fight against this passed pawn. This will be a winning endgame for black. So instead, after knight to d4, we have rook to e4. And now comes rook to c2 with check. We have king to f1 by Fabi, and now rook to c1 with check. King f2, we have rook to c2 with check. King f1, rook to c1 with check, and now king to f2. And here Ding played rook to c2 with check, and it was in this position on move 40 that the players agreed to a draw. They were both very low on time. I think Ding was on some 2 minutes on the clock, Fabi had some 4 minutes on the clock, but now that they've reached time control, they agreed that there's nothing more to push for here. If anything, only black can push here, so not much point in continuing. If Fabi tries something like bringing the king closer, he might run into something like knight f3 check, then the pawn is under attack. If king d1, just a rook here, attacks the king. King c1, let's say rook d6, attacks the defender of the pawn here, and now we'd probably have to trade captures, and again it's black who has the outside pass pawn. If anyone's pushing here, it's black. And on the other hand, if you don't go to e1, let's say you try king e3, it's not much better. Rook c3 check, you can very easily harass rook to c2 check, and now if king to d3, we could go rook to c5, and again there's not much really to do here. You could go knight captures on e5, knight to f5 now going after this pawn, and knight to f3 defending. Now we would have this position where the material is equal, black still with the outside passed pawn. It's hard to imagine that anyone could achieve anything here. So after rook to c2 check, they agree to a draw, and Fabi misses his opportunity to get back at the Ding for beating him in the first half of the tournament, and also trying to catch up to the leader or leaders, as we are not. Oh, okay, I disclosed it in the previous video, so we all know that Ne4 is leading the tournament, but I will not show the standings because I will show at least one more game from round 10, so stay tuned for that. So yeah, that's the game. Hope you guys enjoyed it. Fabi tried to pull something off, but I really didn't see where the poison was. Ding really, played it perfectly. He didn't want to hang on to material, but Fabi wasn't interested in recollecting the material, so it kind of worked well for both of them. But yeah, I hope you guys enjoyed that. I would like to thank Philip Compao, Mario Encinosa, Israel Stones, David Kimura, and Vasudevan Srinivasan for your contribution to my channel. Thank you a lot, I really appreciate it. As usual, you can check 2 of my previous videos here. Thank you all for watching, and I will see you soon, continuing the coverage of the candidates, checking up on your wonderful suggestions, and whatever else happens in the chess world. So thank you all, I will see you soon, and have an excellent rest of your day.